Australian peoples that
I did.
Welcome.
Сайн байцгаана уу хүнд үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр орой манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор байгууллагын нөөцийн төлөвлөлтийн мэрэгжилтэн энэ чиглэлээр ийм тийм зөвлөх компани ажилладаг ноён Oswin Hartung оролцож байна.
Доктор Oswin Hartung 1951 онд төрсэн 1976 онд Марбургийн их сургуулийг сэтгэл зүй, 1988 онд Берлиний техникийн их сургуулийг компьютерийн шинжлэх ухааны чиглэлээр төгссөн. 1992 онд Берлиний техникийн их сургуульд докторийн зэрэг хамгаалсан. 1988 оноос хойш Hartung консалт компани захирлаар ажиллаж байна. Kraft Foods, Daimler-Benz, Osram зэрэг дэлхийн томоохон компаниудтай хамтран ажиллаж байсан.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Please tell us what brought you to Mongolia.
Well, that's a long story. What brought me to Mongolia? I'm working since many years in the area of implementation of business software and already almost 20 years in Asia. And so a Mongolian company, Enriched Consulting, and with his CEO, Mr. Amra, he was searching for a partner to help for implementations in Mongolia. And I think he was searching the web, and then he found us, and so we got in some kind of discussion and talks about it. And since I'm, I would say, quite adventurous if it comes to new challenges, so in 2011 I came the first time to Mongolia and to learn about the situation, and of course getting in some kind of pre-sales talks with Enriched Consulting, and so it started.
So you said implementation of business software. So you actually don't do software itself?
We do, I would say, three things. When you're looking into business software, software for business processes like purchasing, finance, accounting, sales, then usually when you want to implement it, it's a matter that it's not only a technical thing. You are looking into a company, like a typical business consultant, let's say from McKinsey or somewhere else, into the processes. So this is the first point to understand, to see if good new software is really fitting into those processes. And then usually implementation means that standard packages have to be adjusted. The second part, that is somehow more technical, but still with a lot of understanding of the business processes of such a company. And the third point is usually that such a software package is not fitting completely into it. This means you have to build up some add-ons and additional things, and then programming comes in. So we also have programmers who are doing it, business analysis, and people who try to combine it so that it's very fruitful for a company.
So that means you are fitting that particular business program, software program, into the particular conditions of the business process after studying.
Correct. This is always necessary.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit for our audience about the enterprises resources. They are human resources, material resources, financial resources, and time resources. So all these four combined, you make life easier for who runs the business.
Let's say it, we try to make it easier. And of course, in most of the cases, we also will reach this result. But it can be only reached if a company is open for this. And company means not only the management, it also means the employees of the company. If they can encounter that when they are organizing and working in business processes closer with a certain type of software, that they will a lot of help. They can do things much faster. This means they can use their own human resource in a much better way. And time resource is something that you are much closer and faster to the information flow. And this, of course, is a booster when it comes to the question of time.
Often at times when you make a new company, or you are rather develop a junior company, you have to streamline all processes. All these 4 resources we talked about to be followed from in processing and out. And all this through, you buy different, usually, softwares. And I understand there is this, you call it ERP, Enterprises Resources Planning, is being implemented by usually very large companies, for very large companies. How those smaller companies fit into?
If you say usually, then I think it's already a kind of irrational belief. No, when you look worldwide into it, then I would say it's not a matter of the size of the company. It's a matter how a company, or to where a company want to go. If you have a company which has a clear vision about future and is specialized and want to be highly effective, then usually such companies are looking for this type of software because they know from competition and even from other areas what you can do with it, how good such a tool can help you to do it. And then it's not a matter of size, then it's more a matter of thinking and to be open-minded and say, okay, I will go into this way.
So instead of having people doing that on their own and then get integrated in what they do, and you suggest to have that program, why a company would make that decisions initially before, let's say they have a vision, they want to go, it's initially why they need to buy a relatively expensive program?
I think this is different from country to country. Depending somehow to the kind of development status we find in a country. When I now look after all the talks I had in Mongolia and after the first big implementation, then I would say for Mongolia it's mainly a matter of getting a higher speed, a higher quality and a better transparency in financial data. This is something for which Mongolian companies, which are now at the stage of group companies, are really searching for. This, I think, is for them the clear benefit. And very often when you are using old type of software, you know that this is a dead-end street. There will not be any development anymore. And then you have to think about if there's a quality jump. And you cannot make out of every software this quality jump. And then it comes to the point to make such a decision.
So your company advise people to bring different software, or you advise them to bring particular software and you work on that more specialized way?
My company is existing almost 25 years and originally in Germany, and our international branches existing later, like in '95 we already went to China. So in the '90s we have done a lot in Northern Asia, not Mongolia, but Korea, Japan. And since the last years we're also in Southeast Asia, India as well, and US. So when I compare this different status, then we tried several packages. Our step-in part was usually to look into the business processes. Or if I go back to the 80s when we started, at those time companies usually are organized, we call it in kind of towers, you know, you have a department, another department, another department, and usually the departments are working in a very hierarchy way. And at those days nobody was talking about really processes. And the idea to become more efficient with processes, this, in my experience, started in a wider range in the 90s. And this was something which I would say motivated us a lot to change companies, to get into this business re-engineering process. This was actually the beginning, not the software itself. And then we looked for software packages which would support this in a good way as a tool. And then we came to several of those software packages. But since we are originally a German company, we have been very close to the world market leader in this area, SAP. And so most of the implementation we have done is with this software package because it's the most comprehensive.
That SAP.
Correct. But we have done also other implementations for smaller companies if they didn't have, let's say, the investment budget for it.
Welcome. In the world, this is the service big industry, right? All major international, transnationals, every companies use here or there some of these programs anyway. Who are the largest players in this industry, and what is the driver of the industry?
On the software side, definitely SAP. And number 2 is Oracle from the US, but Oracle is far behind of SAP. Even, let's say, in the home market of Oracle in the US, even there SAP is number 1. SAP has a very long history. SAP has been started already in 1972 with those ideas. And for this type
German company,
for this type of software, if you can bundle the knowledge, business knowledge, and develop it, then I think that's the biggest asset you have. And this is what this company is doing since now almost 40 years. And is always also driven by customers. They are everywhere around the world, user conferences in every country. They come up with new demands, and then so is a highly interactive process. This, I think, which keeps this company with the software alive.
So what you are saying is major international companies, large Coca-Cola probably, or
correct,
Pepsi,
Coca-Cola,
would use
Procter & Gamble,
SAP.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, and companies like yours, but you are still in how many countries in your company there?
We are in 1, 2, now I have to count, 3, in 7 countries.
In 7 countries?
Yes.
So, and still the big companies like SAP, Oracle to a certain extent, they are doing the job. Then companies like yours are coming, and what would be your difference? What is what would be your position in the industry?
The position is very simple. I mean, if you are the software producer and you want to have a certain effect, then you need a kind of ecological system around. And ecological system means that there are a lot of companies which are doing the implementation work. They are huge companies, typically from the business consulting side or from the accounting side, like Accenture, like Deloitte, like KPMG, those companies. But they're also more medium size, like our company. They are specialized in the implementation process. And such a software would not have such a wide usage if there would not be so many people around who are doing the implementation and going deep, let's say, in the dialogue process between the customer itself and the software.
I see. Like any industry, along with where they play a good competition along big players, also medium and smaller size players going to the directions where they don't go or don't find necessarily to go cost-wise or to many terms. Okay, well, before we go to Mongolia, please tell us, what does it take to be an, software engineer, of course, and then entrepreneurs like you to go through all this and make such a company? What does it take, education-wise, where you have studied?
Education-wise, maybe let's concentrate what I'm talking to our employees. If we are getting a new consultant or somebody who wants to become a consultant, because you cannot study consultancy, usually I try to combine it. I say you need 3 abilities. 1/3 is psychology. 1/3 is knowledge of business processes. And 1/3 is a technical understanding. Why? Technical understanding seems to be obvious because we are handling software and everybody expects that you can read some programming, some coding or whatever. Business knowledge is very important, that you can talk to customers and you have a clear understanding.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that you always know it better than the customer. But if you have done several or many projects, then cross-industry wise you are combining. You are collecting something like a library of what some people know it or call it best business practice, because you have seen many.
Sure.
And this is very often a quite big help to companies, because companies sometimes like in their own cave, you know, and they are not moving out of this cave, so you bring fresh wind in, at least with ideas. But you have to understand them. You have to merge it to get into a dialogue. And psychology, because it's human business. I mean, the main thing is not a machine. The main thing is like what we are now doing is communication,
Yes.
talking. And talking means that you must have an understanding in the way how, which language, which
Yes.
terms the other
Yes.
person is using end and end.
Yes.
So my education is reflecting it a little bit. So my first job or my first university education is psychology. I worked as a psychologist for several years. Then I went back to university as a teacher and as a researcher in psychology. And then I would say just by incident, it was at a technical university, and so I went beside to computer science while I was teaching. I was studying computer science, and then everything came out and I had to make the best out of it. So therefore, I'm, let's say, so much interested very often for those things in what others are calling soft factors, and I believe in it.
Well, software development, computer is something, a part of our life in the world, maybe for the last 20, 30 years the most. And now it's a part of, really part of life that we cannot avoid in every way. And then probably you help entrepreneurs to be more efficient, right, with their limited resources. How do you find that situation as we talk, the efficiency or problems, but Mongolian issues that Mongolian companies are looking for to solve?
I cannot speak. First I have to be, first I have to restrict it. I cannot speak for all Mongolian companies. I mean, I'm here not full-time, but part-time during the last 2 years. Of course, I talked maybe in the meantime with about 20 to 30 different Mongolian enterprises. We have done now the first big implementation for 4 companies. So this is the basis at the moment in which way I judge it. So it can be wrong, it can be right, I don't know, it's just statistically an example.
Okay, all right.
But I compare it a little bit with my experience I had in other countries when I started almost in a similar way like here in Mongolia. At the moment I feel that, again, if a company is on the level what I call a group level, this means we are talking about a company group. This can be 4 companies, 5, 6, 7, 8, or maybe only 3 companies. Very often in Mongolia they are not yet clearly focused in one area.
Yes.
And they grabbed business wherever it was profitable and mixed it somehow together.
Yes.
And then in such a way how you control it, very often you go the personal way. If it's a family-owned business, then you look for your brother, you look for your cousin or whatever, and everybody is somehow assigned in the personal control of such a company.
Yes.
So, and if things are growing, which is now the case for several of those groups in Mongolia, then you need more. First thing is, I think that you need a kind of professional management.
Yes.
You like to have more transparency of all your data, and also think that you're looking to be more efficient. For instance, you have 4 or 5 companies, then it makes no sense to have in every of those companies an own HR department or an own accounting department. You can put those departments together as a shared service.
Yes.
And then you have to go in a kind of a reorganization.
Yes.
And this, I think, is now the big challenge. Because from my understanding and what I have seen, this step has not yet been done. And some companies are fighting for it. They have a middle management, which I also encountered typically people who started in the US or Japan or Korea and coming back to Mongolia with new management ideas. Very often not in the top level, because if the top level is still family dominated, then it's another question. But in the medium level, but they get the pressure to become more efficient. And then of course they are looking how can they do it. And this is, I think, now the step in which, or the big step they have to take. And this step, therefore you need software. Otherwise it's a lot of manual work, paper from the left side to the right side. And with paper, even if it's a very, let's say, flexible tool, usually when I have good ideas, I write them on paper and not on the computer. But if you have mass data and mass information, you have very low quality. You are slow.
Yes.
And you have low quality.
You have a lot of data, but not information.
That's correct. The information are mainly hidden, and need a lot of hands to take the information out.
So what you would advise to these companies? There are many, of course. We have family businesses for the last 20 years, and many businesses grow to the level that they will either go forward or they will fall down. Going forward, that's exactly what you need, what you said needed.
I look forward, then usually then I have only a global position. And the global position for me is that I say that if you want to look forward with your business, you have not to stick to your own country. You have to see what happens outside of your country. Because I believe that most efficient principles are not mainly dependent on culture.
Yes.
Of course, I always see cultural impacts, especially in the way how we're thinking. And this you cannot erase. That's there very clearly. Therefore, I'm not stupid or blind. But when we talk about efficiency, then efficiency is not a national thing. That's a global thing. And therefore, those companies should look, think, and try to understand how other companies outside of Mongolia are doing it. And this can be a very fruitful situation for them. And somehow, I would say I'm also an ambassador on this, because sometimes my company will be engaged because they expect that we bring in German business knowledge, which is of course true. I would not call it German business knowledge. Let's say kind of developed best business practice, which comes out of a lot of countries. But of course, this we bring in, and therefore we are also clearly committed.
So let's go back to the same company. Let's have a company, an X company in Mongolia, which has 5 different businesses. Okay, and say each company has 100-person staff. So I have a 500-person, 5 companies. So I would rather have one group company or head company with one HR, for example, or maybe one, say, maybe one chief accountant even. So what kind of program I would bring to the table so that everybody install?
Before you come with a program, you have to do some internal changes. Internal changes in terms of rules, of regulations. Such a shared service makes no sense, or can make sense, but is not very efficient if those 5 companies still sticking to their however developed own rules. Typically, when we look into the accounting side, we have different chart of accounts.
Yes.
Usually it makes no sense to have 5 different chart of accounts. And if you have a shared service and you have one person who has to do the accounting for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 companies, you always have to think different. This makes no sense. Therefore, you should first try to find a consolidation base and say, this is my chart of account, and change it. And then you have one chart of account for all the 5 companies. Those changes are necessary. For HR, I can point out similar examples. Very often different rules are not necessary. You should look for the most efficient rule.
Okay, then say at the head company we have a computer which has a program which makes entrance for every new stuff coming, and also a list of whatever we have in 5 companies, and then how, I mean, not to pay them salary and then incentives, I need to know the performance of each of them. So somebody in the companies know that performance. How can I deal with that? The computer is in each computer or in each company, or how does it work?
That's a very specific question regarding the performance. I would maybe use another example. I talked about accounting. Maybe we can still go to HR.
Yes.
But accounting is usually the first point where improvements can be done. I talked about the chart of account. Why 5 different? Next point, when you talk about software, then you need a software which can represent those 5 companies together. Legally, they are still separated companies. And this means
which has own balance sheet, and they
correct.
They own separate companies.
Yes. So in other words, you need a program
Yes.
which can handle within one program all 5 companies, separated to a certain point, but combine it.
Consolidated database.
Again, in such a case, you can have a consolidation process almost completely automatical. And when you look into Mongolian companies, how they do consolidation, that's usually by paper.
Yep.
Yeah. This can be completely automized with such a program when you have those 5 together with the same rules. Because what's the problem? Then the problem is to eliminate the internal revenue and costs, the internal business in between the companies. In
So
this program also shows you and is eliminating it automatically. For HR, I think I would have another idea. The idea, when you have a centralized HR and you have 5 companies, I think talent management is very interesting. It makes no sense to look into talent management for one company. Why?
Of course, efficiency.
Even if you need different abilities, it doesn't matter. But sometimes you have people which even can jump and develop from one business to another business.
Yes.
Therefore, I would use almost same principles, and then you need one database for all your people.
So very interesting case of talent management, as you said. So, but at the end, you need to also integrate, because talent management is one issue and certainly one software. Then we will need material, supply, and then process, and then output, product, maybe after sale even, production, right? After sale service, etc. Then we have financial accounting. So all this together, how they could be compatible, can be compatible. For example, in talent management, the salary pay goes to the overall financial budget. Is it particular software or?
Yes, then we come to ERP software from the idea of this term. Nowadays, for some people, it's already not anymore very modern. For marketing purposes, they're coming up with new terms or whatever. It doesn't matter. But the most important point is that you have a high integration of information flow. This, I think, is very important. You can have always a flow of information. I will use a picture. Let's say now you described HR, you described accounting, you described material management. We can say we have 3 islands. Of course, you can connect those 3 islands via some ferry boats, which are always going in between the islands.
Yes.
But a more efficient way is if you have bridges. And even a more efficient way is if there's no water anymore in between.
Yes.
This means if those 3 islands coming together and they are in one area, so that you even don't need bridges, so that you have let's say a kind of a free flow, let's say by streets or whatever.
Yes.
So when you follow this picture, then it means a high integration of the information flow is very helpful, even if you don't use it completely. But you might have, let's say, certain challenges, and then you know that you can be better if you use it right away. I will give you came up with a budget. That's a very nice topic in SAP, in such a highly integrated software. The budget is almost the HR budget is almost generated automatically. How? Because you have an organizational structure. In the organizational structure, you have titles, positions, and you say, I want to have this, and this, and this, and this, and this not.
Yes.
So, and then, of course, you, as a characteristic, you have salaries there.
Yes.
And then the program automatically is calculating for you the budget you need.
Yes.
And then it goes automatically to finance. In finance, it's more aggregated.
Yes.
And then if the finance guys say, but this is too much costs,
Yes.
and give you the ball back,
Yes.
then you are thinking about what can you do in your structure. Let's say if you can share different departments, and. Again, it's not a matter that you're just playing with financial figures. You are thinking about the content of your organization, and the financial figures are something which is a simple mathematic result out of it. But this is not the main point. Of course, for some people, they have to judge it. That's clear on an aggregation level. But a real good change should be done in this organizational chart, and thinking about what you need and what you don't need. And if this is highly integrated, it means that right away, in real time, if somebody gives you a remark, you will do something new, and in real time, he will see already the figure there.
Yes. May I ask at the end 2 questions which could be, I think, of more interest for our audience. One is, say, about for the company. I mean, we have the company, ideal company with 5 companies with each with 500, and I have 500 people, and I want to have all these things introduced. First, how much it will cost. Second, how long it will take time. About, of course.
The last question is the easiest to answer.
Time.
In our experience, usually below a half year, such a project is not possible.
Okay.
Because we
more
have
than 6 months. Okay.
It's more than 6 months. We try always to cut it in pieces, working pieces, not pieces which have no benefit.
Yes.
To make a package of functions, and let's go the first step and do it in 6 months. And then you prove if you have advantages, if you have a return of investment, and then we can think about and discuss about the next step.
Certainly.
This is our way to proceed. So therefore, when I say 6 months, it doesn't mean that a company is completely changed and on the highest level.
Yes.
Therefore, we will need more.
But plus, it depends on how much committed the management is. This is chart everything what you said.
This is the most important point.
Yep.
Because first thing is that is a very much additional work for the employees of the company.
Yes.
And you cannot take in such a project people who have not enough to do. Usually you have the best people to take, and the best people already have 200% to do. So in other words, this is usually the conflict, but there's no other way. We have to go through this.
Price-wise?
Price-wise, this depends. Price-wise, I would say if we look into such a half year, usually it's calculated by time and material, how many consultants are necessary. If we have several companies, it will come up with a minimum, I would say, of about 500,000, 600, 700,000 US dollars for the consulting work. Below this, we cannot do.
Plus software.
Plus software. So software usually is counted by users. And therefore, most of the software systems, they almost in a range around 2,000, 2,500 US dollar per user when you buy the software. Therefore, for different ERP systems, it's almost the same.
Maybe several consultants can come and have the period. If the company is committed and ready, they can do it shorter and faster. But still about the 500,000 for consulting hours, and then plus about 200, 300,000 software.
If you look into a half year, that's really a minimum.
Yes,
right.
Certainly, because this sort of investment will make more efficiency and more profit afterwards.
Of course. I mean,
they will make the economy a lot.
Yes. When it's very easy to make a calculation of return of investment. But of course, when we're getting into a project, we cannot give the guarantee for this because we are not realizing it. The company itself is realizing it. But let's say when we look into material management, And typically with such a program, you will reduce your stock a lot.
Yes.
And if
Because
you reduce your stock and you're just calculating the
Yes.
interests you are paying for it, then a return of investment is very, very fast.
Yes. We have very shortly, I mean, for of course this short conversation, we have discovered, covered a lot issues of enterprises resource planning, and certainly you having such experience and plus having a Mongolian partner will be, hopefully it will be a good contribution towards more efficiency of Mongolian companies down the road.
That's our wish.
Thank you
Yes.
very much. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.